All right, Alexander, let's talk about Turkey and how it's weighing in and asserting its position with regards to Israel and the Palestinians and the conflict in and around Gaza. And it's interesting because in this scenario, Erdogan is actually taking on Joe Biden here. And the title from Zero Hedge kind of says it all. The title reads, quote, "Blood on your hands. Erdogan issues worst rebuke to Biden since taking office." And Erdogan also said, "You are writing history with your bloody hands," Erdogan said in remarks addressed to President Biden. And this has to do with, of course, the Gaza crisis. And it also has to do with Turkey's outrage, according to this article, over news reports that Biden has approved a $735 million weapons sale from the U.S. to Israel. So how do you see this with Erdogan and his going after Biden?
Well, again, one has to say first of all that it's partly Erdogan's propensity for grandstanding and for extreme language and taking extreme positions, which are not necessarily, by the way, in Turkey's best interests. There have been times when Erdogan has had, believe it or not, quite good relations with Israel. I mean, Turkey historically has had good relations with Israel. Now, Erdogan, because he's trying to play the game of being the great defender of Sunni Islam in sometime competition with the Saudis, is taking this very strong line about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. His party has connections with the Muslim Brotherhood, to which Hamas is associated. So he can't resist the temptation of, taking this extremely strong line on this issue. And that no doubt goes down well with some of his supporters, his more religiously minded supporters in Turkey. But by doing so, he is again complicating his relations with the United States at a time when Turkey is in economic crisis and is looking increasingly isolated in the region. He's had difficult relations with the Russians because he's come out in support of Zelensky and Ukraine and demanded that Crimea be returned to Ukraine, which annoyed the Russians intensely. He's been apparently supporting the Azerbaijanians to probe in parts of Armenia, which has created another difficult episode, which the Russians are again known to be furious about. He's having this difficult relationship with the Saudis all the time. He's wrecked his relations with Israel, and now he's now saying that Biden, President of the United States, has got blood at his hands. This just a few weeks after he seemed to be trying to negotiate some kind of easing of tensions with the US, and was even talking of ways of getting Turkey back into the F-35 aircraft program. I mean, it's difficult sometimes to keep track of what Erdogan does. He doesn't seem able to follow a consistent policy for any length of time. But I'm going to express my feelings here. I think this thing that he has just done with these statements are the closest you will get to Erdogan's genuine, visceral feelings. He is, and people always overlook this, he is generally a Muslim, a deeply religious Muslim. He is generally, I think, aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood, and he is generally sympathetic to Hamas. And I think these comments probably come closest that you will ever get from Erdogan to a true expression of his underlying beliefs. So what he's saying is probably bad for Turkey, and it will enhance Turkey's reputation amongst Sunni Muslim and Arab opinion in the Middle East. How useful that is for Erdogan, I'm not sure, but in the longer term, that is, I think, what he feels he wants to do, even as it damages Turkey's relations with the United States and with this administration, probably irretrievably.
All right, Alexander, let me read you his actual statements and you could comment on it to close out the video. So following a meeting with his cabinet, Erdogan issued a rebuke to the US president saying, "Now, unfortunately, you, Biden, are writing history with your bloody hands, with this event in which Gaza is being attacked with seriously disproportionate force, causing the martyrdom of thousands of people. You have forced us to say this." Then Erdogan said this about the weapons sale. "Today we saw Biden's signature on weapons sales to Israel. Palestinian territories are awash with persecution, suffering, and blood, like many other territories that lost the peace with the end of the Ottomans." That's an interesting phrase, with the end of the Ottomans. "Are you supporting that?" That's what Erdogan says. Finally, Erdogan says that a solution to this conflict is that Jerusalem should be governed by a commission that has representatives from three religions: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Finally, he also took a swipe at Austria over reports of the Austrians flying an Israeli flag from a government building. He said Austria is trying to make Muslims pay the price of their own genocide against the Jews. So obviously Erdogan covered a lot of ground and very controversial statements. What do you make of this?
Very, very controversial statements. Now, can I just say, I read an opinion poll quite recently, and I discovered that, in fact, he is the most popular leader amongst Arabs at the moment, and has been for some time, it seems. So he is appealing very much to Sunni Muslim Arab sentiment across the Middle East, and doing so successfully. And he's partly doing that in these statements. He's also pursuing again his neo-Ottoman policy, which is to try to position Turkey as the leader of Sunni Muslims, pursue, challenge in effect Saudi Arabia's position for that role. And that's again what he's talking about. And he sees the Middle East in a way as a kind of sphere of influence, if you like, for Turkey, and Turkey positioned as the protector of Sunni Islam across the Middle East. But of course, what he's also doing is he's setting himself again in conflict with the great powers, because the United States is going to be deeply disapproving of these statements, and Turkey does not have the power to take on the United States. He's taking on Austria and by extension the European Union, with which he plays always this complicated game. And of course, up to now, he's had this complicated relationship with the Russians too. It is an overambitious strategy for Turkey. It's one which undoubtedly appeals to his domestic parts of his domestic base. It appeals to Muslim opinion across the world. It appeals to Arab opinion in the Middle East. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be able to come to the rescue of the Palestinians, irrespective of what he says. So it's posturing, it's rhetoric. One can't say it doesn't mean anything, because it's part of a kind of policy, a foreign policy, to create a sphere of influence from Turkey in the Middle East. But it's a policy that is ultimately unachievable because it goes beyond Turkey's strength.
Yeah. I wonder if the U.S. is going to react to these types of statements. Well, the Biden administration, not even the U.S., the Biden administration.
Well, we know for a fact that the president, Joe Biden, doesn't like Erdogan. So when he reads comments like this, which he will, what's he going to make of that? I mean, he's going to like Erdogan even less. And that's going to make the administration in general, not just Biden, whose ability to make decisions we've debated many times, it's going to make the entire administration more hostile to Erdogan and to Turkey than it is now. And given that Turkey has difficult relations with the other great powers, with China and Russia, sometimes good, sometimes not so good, never easy. He's losing Turkey leverage and diplomatic maneuver space by making these decisions. I mean, in summary, this is an overambitious foreign policy he's trying to establish Turkey as a kind of dominant power in the Middle East. He's appealing to Sunni Muslim sentiment around the world. He's appealing to the Arab street. He's appealing to parts of the Turkish street. But realistically, There's nothing he can do to change US policy towards Israel. There's nothing he can do to affect Israeli policy in the Palestinian territories. He can't change these things, but at the same time, by striking these poses, he is going to annoy the United States at a time when his relations with the other great powers, Russia and China, are tricky. I'm not sure how this works in Turkey's favour. A more measured policy, one in which he talks in a more constructive way to the Americans, perhaps tries to talk also to the Israelis, with whom, as I've said, in the past he's had good relations, and which tries to work towards achieving a ceasefire there, well, that might be more effective. And this proposal, which I've seen him float at various times, of inserting Turkish troops as peacekeepers in the occupied territories, well, I mean, that's an absolute fantasy. And if he really believes that, then I have to say he's lost all touch with reality. I mean, he said he's floated that idea in the past, and I know some Turkish diplomats have, but it's an absolute non-starter.
All right, we'll leave it to there. Guys, Real News, 10% off all Duran merch. Odyssey, Super U, and Locals, as well as BitChute. You will find exclusive videos. We have 3 exclusive videos on those platforms. Join us on those platforms. You'll find all the links down below. Take care.